Yeah.
Oh, hey! Aren't you Wally Waltner, the guy who's publishing a novel with Raconteur Press?
Why, yes, I am.
Would you like to talk to us for a few minutes?
Of course, I'd love to. I will stay in the relative spot, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, like all things Raconteur Press does, it's always a little bit improvised. So,
That's all right.
Wally
Exactly.
Waltner, here we are at
Yes.
FinCon 2020. And what's about to happen through your life?
Well, it's FinCon 20 in 2024.
Thank you.
So, yeah, FinCon, interestingly enough, is the con that I met Raconteur Press at 2 years ago at FinCon in 2022. I was introduced to the crew here and got along wonderfully with them. And that was when I first started thinking, hey, doing this writing thing would actually be interesting. And now at this FinCon, I'm promoting my new novel with coming through Raconteur Press, Muses War, Overture of Shadow.
Okay, so what made you want to write this?
This is a story that's been in my head for a long time. And I will say that one of the crystallizing moments for it for me, and a shout out to the Writer Dojo, Larry Correa and Steve Diamond, they had an episode with a guest, Craig Nybo, called The Rhythm of Writing. And it was about how musicians could carry over things that they think about and things that make sense to them into other creative arts like writing. And Craig is a professional musician, professionally trained. I'm a professional musician, and classically trained. And so about 10 minutes into that episode, Steve asks, well, how would you, incorporate musical knowledge? And he gave a wonderful answer. He basically took the tenets of Western music theory and said you could use that as a framework to design a very nice, pseudo-scientific magic system, which is a wonderful idea, which is not what I did. But what it did do is start the what if, questions in my mind. And then the if this, then what, and that framed the story for me. I've always wanted to do things, when I play Dungeons & Dragons, I'm always a bard. I have been a bard in the SCA. I have been a performing artist almost my entire life. And so centering a performing artist as the hero of an epic fantasy spoke to me. It gave it, and it takes in, what I've ended up with has elements of Valdemar in it. It has elements of Grimoires in it. It has elements of Star Wars in it. But it's centered around something that's not expected. So, if you center a bard as your hero, and you center performing artists as your support characters, what do you do? And we think about epic fantasy, we think about magic, we think about wizards with beards that look like this, and they're flinging elemental things like fireballs and lightning bolts, ice storms, or they're pulling ley line power from the earth and that kind of stuff. But there's always some external element to it. So I asked myself, what if the process of creating something beautiful had supernatural power to it? What if the act of creation itself was magical, for lack of a better word? And so exploring that and then going beyond the concept of the bard who sings in the background encouraging others to do better things, going past that and going to the act of creation itself. So for example, how does one in my universe create a magic sword, or like I said, magic sword? Because if I take a supernaturally gifted blacksmith who is inspired by the muse, that's why it's called Muses War, and folks who show supernatural ability in creation in the arts are called the muse touched. and so you have a muse-touched blacksmith who pounds out a blade, and then you have a muse-touched, metal worker who engraves runes into it. And you have a muse-touched leather worker who creates the scabbard and the grip. And you have a muse-touched jeweler who sets, something in the pommel. And then you have a bard who, throughout all of these processes, are singing songs and telling stories of noble knights in heated battle, overcoming adversity, and championing the good, the true, and the beautiful. And that creates, and with that, every one of those muse-touched creators adds their piece to that sword and makes it better. And not necessarily doing things like, being a +5 vorpal death sword, but it just makes it has supernatural effects that are more subtle, but certainly effective. So, with that in mind, that comes to our story and our protagonist, Dorian. Dorian is a wandering minstrel. He is a rural upbringing, and he prefers traveling, and he prefers being in a small village bar, and tavern, rather than being in the big cities. And he loves, he has wanderlust. He does his thing. He himself is muse-touched. He spent time in the capital training at what's called the Collegium Bardica, which is a division of the Grand University of Arts and Sciences in my kingdom of Braheimen. Braheimen is the capital of the kingdom. It was its own city-state, but it was the first to have a collection of these muse-touched individuals, and so became powerful not through necessarily military might, but through culture, and by projecting and sharing that culture with the lands around them. You now have 5 baronies that have joined with Braheimen under a single monarch in order to further, those platonic virtues, the good, the true, and the beautiful. And certainly there's military aspects to it. Again, weapon making is an art. And in fact, there is a division of the university called the Artem Piscola, which is the weapon maker school. With that said, so Dorian receives a summons from his old teacher, who is currently the headmaster of the Collegium Bardica. And the letter asks him to break his circuit and return to the capital because his mentor needs advice. And so when we meet Dorian, he is on his way back to the capital early in order to meet with his mentor. When he arrives at the city, he discovers that a murder has taken place. And now he has been thrown into this court intrigue. And as a result, Dorian has to overcome the fact that he has been thrown off of all of his patterns. He's now dealing with people and bureaucracies and court intrigues that he doesn't necessarily feel comfortable dealing with. So that's part of what he overcomes. But he also realizes that there are secrets that have been hidden for a long time that changes really how they perceive their relationship as muse-touched. And that basically begins the hero's journey for Dorian.
So it was so exciting to hear your reading yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to confess something to you. I am not typically drawn to fantasy books, but I'm excited to read your book because you seem to be drawing on a very classic basis. What are some influences on your play?
So I mentioned a couple of things that I draw from literature. Like I said, I draw from Valdemar, Mercedes. I grew up in the era of Mercedes Lackey and Larry Dixon. As far as my teen years were going. Of course, I'm a Tolkien nut. From a science fiction standpoint, Robert Heinlein is who I gravitate towards. And Moon is a Harsh Mistress is still kind of the centerpiece book of why I'm in fandom in the first place. I do confess, like I said, I borrow a little bit from Larry Creed's Grimoire series. There is certainly, from a light and dark standpoint, there is certainly influences from Star Wars, which is itself influenced from other places. I would say, from a cultural standpoint, I want to tell a story about the importance of art in society and the role of art in society and the way that art influences culture. Culture is upstream of everything. If the culture becomes corrupt, bad things happen. And that honestly is that's part of what this series is meant to be about, is identifying and dealing with the after effects of a corrupted culture.
And so you've been writing before, and you've done short stories with Raconteur Press. What made you want to do your novel with Raconteur Press?
First of all, Raconteur is the most author-friendly publishing house in publishing today, bar none. I will die on that. When I read about or hear about some of the horror stories in trad and honestly in some cases in indie publishing, the trust that an author puts in a publisher is paramount. And what Ian and Jana and crew have done is set a bar for transparency, honesty, and fairness in publisher-author relations. That is, it sets an entirely different bar than what the community is used to. And that's important because unless someone leads, no one will follow. And if we want, and I hate to use a platitude, but be the change you want to see in the world. And so if you want publishing to change, you have to model the behavior you want to see. And what Raconteur Press is doing is important. And I want to, and I'm flattered that Raconteur thinks that this idea is good enough to be shared with the world. I think what the themes that I'm exploring are absolutely in line with what Raconteur wants to see in publishing, and I'm happy and excited to share it with the world in partnership with Raconteur.
And so, when can we expect to see this on the shelves?
As I understand it, the serial is starting in May, and I think it's either a late May or early June release for the complete. I am excited because that puts us in LibertyCon season, and it means that we can have a proper celebration in a proper setting like this, to be able to launch, to quote unquote officially launch Muses War.
And is this a standalone book or is this a series?
And here's where I must confess, one of the things new authors are told, don't write epic fantasy, because of the folks that shall not be mentioned, George R. R. Martin, Patrick Rothfuss. And it was funny because I actually had a coworker who I was talking to about the book about, and she said, "Oh yes, I'm I'm a fantasy fan." I sent her my blurb, and she said, "Oh, this is cool." And the next thing that came out of her mouth was, "Is this a standalone book or is it part of a series?" So, But one of the things, again, I appreciate about Raconteur, I know that there's a core set of fans who will buy it, who will tell their friends about it if they like it. And I hope they do. I really hope they do. Please, like
Tell your friends.
And that makes me feel more comfortable and confident to go ahead and push forward with the rest of the series. And book 2 is right now. I have the entire series plotted out. I expect that it will be a trilogy. It might stretch to 4, even 5, depending. But what I think the entire story is plotted out, and I'm already partway through book 2. But like I said, if with anyone else, I would be afraid, because rapid release is right now the predominant feeling in indie publishing. But Raconteur is willing to take a chance on me with this, and I'm willing to follow through. Because I believe, because one, I just don't want to let you down, and I don't want to let John down. So.
And it's a wonderful idea, because every time you tell me, I want to keep hearing more and more. So I'm really excited that I get to work with you on this too. I'm really excited about that.
For people who are looking for epic fantasy that explores deep themes that doesn't have inverted tropes and that calls back to the classics. Of course, I'm not going to try to compare myself to any of those greats, but the spirit of fantasy should be uplifting, fantasy should be positive, fantasy should have conflict, clear conflict between good and evil, and the humans win in the end kind of thing. That's what I'm trying to capture, and I'm trying to help people. I want people to fall in love with the notion that culture matters, and that defending culture is vital, and the arts are the way to defend culture, because we express ourselves through art to be who we want to be, and to do something aspirational. So.
Wally, thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
I think we can end it there.
Okay.